You know that voice in your head that tells you you're not good enough? The one that says you're going to fail before you even try? The one that picks apart every little thing you do and makes you feel small? Yeah, that voice. Here's something that might blow your mind. That voice isn't actually you. It's not your true self speaking. It's something you learned, something that was programmed into you. And here's the really important part. If it was learned, it can be unlearned. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share with you could completely change how you see yourself. Let's start with a simple question. When did that critical voice first show up? Think about it. When you were a little kid, maybe 3 or 4 years old, did you wake up and immediately start criticizing yourself? Did you look in the mirror and think, wow, I'm not smart enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm never going to be successful? Of course not. Little kids don't do that. They're confident. They're curious. They try things without worrying about failure. A toddler learning to walk doesn't fall and think, I'm such an idiot. I'll never get this right. Maybe I should just give up on walking altogether. No, they just get back up and try again. They're not afraid of making mistakes because they haven't learned to judge themselves yet. So where did that inner critic come from? It came from the outside world. It came from the people around you, the environment you grew up in, the messages you received over and over again until they became your own internal voice. Maybe it was a parent who was always pointing out what you did wrong instead of what you did right. Maybe it was a teacher who made you feel stupid when you didn't understand something. Maybe it was kids at school who teased you. Maybe it was a culture or society that had very specific ideas about who you should be and how you should act. Whatever the source, you absorbed those critical messages like a sponge, and eventually, you didn't even need those external voices anymore because you started doing their job for them. Here's what happened. Your brain was trying to protect you. I know that sounds weird because the inner critic feels like the opposite of protection, but hear me out. When you're a child, your survival depends on being accepted by the people who take care of you. If a parent or authority figure criticizes you, your young brain thinks, okay, if I criticize myself first, if I point out my own flaws before anyone else does, maybe I can fix them and avoid rejection. Maybe I can stay safe. So that critical voice becomes a kind of defense mechanism. Your brain attempts to help you fit in, to help you avoid pain and rejection. The problem is that the strategy doesn't actually work very well, and it definitely doesn't work when you're an adult with different needs and circumstances. Think about how the inner critic actually talks to you. Is it kind? Is it helpful? Is it constructive? Usually not. Usually it's harsh, it's mean, it's absolute. It doesn't say, hey, that didn't go well. What can we learn from this? It says, you're such a failure. You always mess everything up. You'll never be successful. See the difference? One is helpful feedback, the other is just abuse. And yet we let that voice run wild in our heads, saying things to us that we would never say to a friend, that we would never say to someone we care about. If your best friend came to you after making a mistake and you said to them what your inner critic says to you, you wouldn't have that friend for very long. Now let's talk about whose voice it really is. This is where it gets interesting. Close your eyes for a second. Well, not literally because you're watching this, but imagine the voice of your inner critic. Really listen to it. Does it sound like you, or does it sound like someone else? For a lot of people, when they really pay attention, they realize the inner critic sounds suspiciously like a parent, or a teacher, or a coach, or someone else from their past. It's using their phrases, their tone, their words. That's because it literally is their voice. You've internalized it so deeply that you think it's your own thoughts, but it's actually an echo of someone else's criticism that you've been carrying around for years or even decades. I want you to understand something crucial here. That voice, that inner critic, it's not the truth. It's not reality. It's just old programming. It's like having outdated software running in your brain, software that was maybe somewhat useful when you were 7 years old trying to navigate a confusing world, but it's completely inappropriate and unhelpful now. You're not 7 anymore. You don't need to protect yourself in the same ways. You don't need to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's expectations. But that voice keeps running the same old script because nobody ever told it to stop. So what do we do about it? How do we change this? The first step is awareness, which you're already doing right now by watching this video and thinking about this stuff. You have to recognize the inner critic for what it is, a learned pattern, not your true self. Start paying attention to when it shows up and what it says. Don't judge it. Don't fight it. Just notice it. Oh, there's that critical voice again. There it is, telling me I'm not good enough. Just that act of noticing creates a little bit of distance between you and the voice. You start to see it as something separate from your core self. The second step is to question it. When the inner critic says something, ask yourself, is that actually true? Where's the evidence? If this went to court, would there be proof beyond a reasonable doubt that I'm a complete failure, that I always mess up, that I'll never succeed? Usually, the answer is no. The inner critic deals in absolutes and exaggerations. You made one mistake, and it says you always fail. You had one bad day, and it says you'll never be happy. Challenge those statements. Look for counter evidence. Look for times when you did succeed, when things did go well, when you were capable and strong. The third step is to develop a new voice, a compassionate voice. This is probably the hardest part because it feels fake at first. It feels weird to talk to yourself kindly when you've been beating yourself up for years. But I want you to imagine how you would talk to a good friend who was struggling, or how you would talk to a child who was upset. You wouldn't be harsh. You'd be understanding. You'd be encouraging. You'd say things like, "Hey, this is hard. You're doing your best. It's okay to make mistakes. That's how we learn. I believe in you." That's the voice you need to cultivate for yourself. Here's a practical exercise you can try. When you notice the inner critic, actually respond to it out loud if you're alone, or in your head if you're in public. Treat it like a separate entity. If it says, "You're so stupid," you respond, "Thank you for sharing, but I don't agree. I made a mistake, but that doesn't make me stupid." If it says, "You're going to fail," you respond, "I appreciate the concern, but I'm going to try anyway. And even if I don't succeed the first time, I'll learn something valuable." You're literally reprogramming your brain by creating new neural pathways, new patterns of thinking. Another powerful thing to understand is where the inner critic gets its power. It gets its power from you believing it's telling you the truth, from you thinking it's your own wise inner voice trying to help you. But once you see it for what it really is, just old learned patterns, outdated programming, other people's judgments that you internalized, it starts to lose its grip on you. It's like the Wizard of Oz. Once you pull back the curtain and see it's just a regular person operating the controls, it's not scary anymore. Let's talk about perfectionism for a moment, because the inner critic and perfectionism are often closely linked. The inner critic loves perfectionism because perfectionism sets you up to fail. If the standard is perfection, you'll never meet it, which means the inner critic always has ammunition. It can always point out what's wrong, what's not good enough, and where you fell short. But here's the truth. Perfectionism isn't about being excellent or having high standards. It's about fear. It's about being so afraid of judgment and rejection that you try to make yourself bulletproof by being perfect, which is impossible. Nobody's perfect. Perfectionism is just another learned behavior, another way your brain tried to protect you that ended up hurting you instead. What if instead of perfect, you aimed for good enough? What if you aimed for progress instead of perfection? What if you allowed yourself to be human, to make mistakes, to have flaws, and still be worthy of love and respect? That's what the inner critic doesn't want you to know, that you're already worthy. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to prove it. Your worth as a human being isn't dependent on your achievements or your appearance or your productivity or how few mistakes you make. You're worthy simply because you exist. I know some of you are thinking, but wait, if I don't criticize myself, won't I just become lazy and complacent? Won't I stop trying to improve? And that's a really common fear, but it's based on a misunderstanding. You don't need harsh self-criticism to motivate yourself or to grow. In fact, research shows that self-compassion is actually more effective than self-criticism for motivation and achievement. When you're kind to yourself, when you support yourself, you're more likely to take healthy risks, to bounce back from setbacks, to keep trying. When you're constantly criticizing yourself, you're more likely to give up, to avoid challenges, to play it safe because you're terrified of that critical voice getting even louder. Think about it in terms of learning. If you're trying to learn a new skill and every time you make a mistake, someone yells at you and tells you you're terrible, how motivated are you going to be to keep practicing? Not very. But if someone encourages you, acknowledges your effort, points out what you're doing well while gently suggesting improvements, you're much more likely to keep going. You need to be that encouraging person for yourself. Here's something else that might surprise you. The inner critic isn't just one voice. For a lot of people, there are actually multiple critical voices, each one may be representing a different person or influence from your past. There might be the perfectionist voice that demands excellence. There might be a fearful voice that tries to keep you safe by keeping you small. There might be the comparative voice that's always measuring you against other people. There might be the shame voice that attacks your core sense of self. When you start paying attention, you might notice these different flavors of criticism. And that's actually helpful because you can start to understand where each one came from and what it's trying to do. Let me tell you something really important. Changing your relationship with your inner critic is not about getting rid of it completely. That voice might always be there to some degree because those neural pathways were laid down early and they're strong. But what you can change is how much power you give it. You can change whether you believe it. You can change whether you let it dictate your choices and your feelings about yourself. It's like having a backseat driver who's always criticizing your driving. You can't kick them out of the car, but you can turn down the volume. You can ignore their unhelpful comments, and you can trust your own judgment about where you're going and how to get there. This work takes time. I want to be real with you about that. You've probably been listening to that inner critic for years, maybe your whole life. You're not going to undo all of that in a day or a week. But every time you notice the critical voice, every time you question it, every time you respond with compassion instead of believing it automatically, you're making progress. You're retraining your brain. You're building new habits of thought. And over time, it gets easier. The compassionate voice gets stronger. The critical voice gets quieter. You start to feel more at peace with yourself. One thing that really helps is surrounding yourself with people who don't feed your inner critic. Pay attention to the people in your life. Are there people who are always pointing out what's wrong, who are critical and judgmental, who make you feel small? Those people are reinforcing your inner critic. On the other hand, are there people who see your strengths, who encourage you, who accept you as you are? Those people help you build that compassionate inner voice. You might need to set some boundaries with critical people and spend more time with supportive people. Your inner world is influenced by your outer world. Let's talk about what's on the other side of this work. What happens when you're not constantly at war with yourself? What happens when that critical voice doesn't run your life anymore? You have more energy, for one thing, because you're not spending all your mental resources defending yourself against your own thoughts. You're more creative because you're not afraid to try new things and make mistakes. You're more resilient because you know that a setback doesn't mean you're a failure as a person. You have better relationships because you're not projecting your own self-judgment onto others or assuming they're judging you as harshly as you judge yourself. You're more authentic because you're not trying to twist yourself into some impossible ideal. You're just you, and that's enough. Here's a perspective shift that might help. Your inner critic thinks it's protecting you, but what it's actually doing is keeping you trapped. It's like an overprotective parent who won't let their kid do anything because they might get hurt. Yeah, if you never try anything, you'll never fail, but you'll also never succeed. You'll never grow. You'll never discover what you're capable of. The inner critic would rather you play it safe and stay small than risk the possibility of criticism or failure. But is that really living? Is that the life you want? What if you started treating yourself the way you treat someone you really love? What if you gave yourself the same patience, the same understanding, the same benefit of the doubt that you'd give to your best friend or your child? What if you talked to yourself the way a good parent talks to a kid, with love and encouragement and belief in their potential? That's not being soft on yourself. That's not making excuses. That's being human. That's being realistic. That's creating the internal environment where you can actually thrive. I want to share something with you. The voice that tells you you're not good enough, that you're going to fail, that you should just give up, that voice is wrong. It's been wrong about you your whole life. You are so much more than that voice says you are. You're more capable, more resilient, more worthy than you give yourself credit for. And I know you might not believe me right now, especially if that critical voice is loud, but I want you to consider the possibility that I'm right and it's wrong. Just consider it. Think about a time, any time in your life, when you did something hard, when you got through something difficult, when you surprised yourself with your own strength. The inner critic doesn't want you to remember those times because they contradict its narrative. But they're real. They're evidence that you're stronger than you think. Hold on to those moments. Remind yourself of them when the critical voice gets loud. Here's your homework. And yes, I'm giving you homework because this stuff requires practice. For the next week, I want you to notice your inner critic. Just notice. Don't judge it. Don't fight it. Just pay attention. When does it show up? What does it say? Can you identify whose voice it might originally have been? Write it down if that helps. Then, once you've noticed it, I want you to respond to it with one compassionate statement. Just one. It can be as simple as, I'm doing my best, or it's okay to make mistakes, or I'm still learning. Just one compassionate statement to start building that new voice. And here's a question for you, and I really want you to think about this. If you could say one thing to your inner critic, what would it be? Would you thank it for trying to protect you, but tell it you don't need that kind of protection anymore? Would you tell it to back off? Would you ask it where it came from? Drop your answer in the comments because I'm genuinely curious, and I think sharing our experiences with this can help all of us feel less alone in dealing with these voices. Remember, that critical voice isn't you. It's something you learned, which means it's something you can unlearn. You're not stuck with it forever. You have the power to change your relationship with that voice. You have the power to build a new, kinder, more compassionate inner dialogue. It takes work, it takes time, it takes practice, but it's possible. And you deserve that kindness. You deserve to be free from that constant criticism. You deserve to feel at peace with yourself. So start today. Start right now. Notice the critic. Question it. Respond with compassion. And watch how your life begins to change when you stop being your own worst enemy and start being your own best friend. You've got this. I believe in you, and I hope you're starting to believe in yourself, too. If this video resonated with you, hit that like button so more people can find this message. And subscribe to the channel because we're going to keep exploring topics like this, topics that help you understand yourself better and live a more authentic, fulfilling life. Thanks for watching. And remember, you're not the voice that criticizes you. You're the awareness that can choose not to listen. Claude is an AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.